Welcome to the Industry Angel Podcast. We hear from the best business minds across the globe. Entrepreneurs, social influencers, marketing mavens, and sales rock stars. We've got them all. Here comes your weekly dose of inspiration with your host, Ian Farah.
Welcome to episode 98 of the Industry Angel. Thanks for the feedback on last week's episode. Some of you like the change, a shorter episode, being able to listen to it all at once rather than breaking it up into two, maybe, going to work, coming back, that kind of thing. Maybe I'll throw some more of them in now and again, eh? When I've been out and about, sometimes I've captured my thoughts on the portable recorder. Sometimes I've grabbed people at events. Should I do more of that, maybe? Let me know. Remember, we've got the live episode here in South Shields on August 14th, the 100th one. Grab your tickets on the homepage of industryangel.com. It'll be a great networking event. We'll have a lot of fun. Remember, you can reach me on all the usual social channels, and I love to hear from you. Okay then, let's hear from today's guest. Today we have award-winning trainer, coach, and speaker. Welcome to the Industry Angel, Mike Lieber.
Wow, thank you, Ian Farah. Well, I feel I need to use your full name because you Mike levered me, so I'm going to Ian Farah you.
I did lever you. So, listen, you are award-winning trainer, right?
Why are you laughing? It's true. As impossible as it seems, given that you've met me, it's true. It happened.
What is it, 25 metres or 50 metres swim that you did?
Hey, it was underwater, don't mock it.
All right, okay. So, what are you? Sales trainer of the universe 2013 or something?
I think they're meant to go for that, but they reined it in a bit. And I was voted Britain's Sales Trainer of the Year 2013-14 because of some super work that we did with a client who, their figures, not ours, increased their margins by 19.7%. And it'll always stick that it was 19.7 and not 20. The statistician in me wants to round it up, but I'm not allowed to.
You never tell this story, do you?
Which one?
The fact that you're sales trainer of the year and it was 19.7 rolls off your tongue.
Yeah. Keep it quiet. It's burning inside. My therapist says I need to get it out more.
I'll get the T-shirt printed in the morning.
Yeah. I have a range. What colour would you like, sir?
So that's pretty cool, eh? We are stoked with that then.
I was stunned.
Right.
So myself and Nev went off to that London village, which is just south of Sheffield. We went there for the awards evening, genuinely not thinking it was even going to come second, especially when we saw the big names that were on there, the proper big names of Britain's training industry. Mm-hmm. And I had my money on who I thought was going to win. And I remember Nev was sat to my right, and the lovely couple who owned the company, who nominated me, were sat with us as well. We'd had it was one of them big occasions, about 500 people in the room, black tie job, and lots of flowing fizz. And when the chap who my money on for winning came second, I turned to Nev and went, well, that's that then. Let's have another glass of fizz. And then when they said, and the winner is, and I tell you, it was Bill Turnbull, the chap who used to do the BBC breakfast anchorman. Mm-hmm. He, when they announced that I'd won, well, I can't repeat possibly because I think this is a PG rated show. I can't repeat what I did. And Nev punched me in the shoulder and it hit me with such force. I nearly fell off the chair and in a complete shock, but got me out together for the photo session on stage and then for the interview afterwards on camera, sobered up very quickly. And even found the nous to quote the beloved Sir Alex of the Ferguson. So there we go.
Oh, can we find this on YouTube?
To protect the innocent, I'm going to say no.
Right, okay.
It'll be somewhere. I'll tell you where it is. I think it's on my LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
I think it's on there, the little video clip of getting it.
It will be, and you with the T-shirt on saying Britain.
I had a black tie on my... Hey, I'm going to say a proper black tie, man. One that you fasten, you have to tie and everything. No
Good man.
Nonsense going
no
on
fakes.
Here. No fakes.
So, because of this then, are you a sales trainer? Is that what you do then?
So short answer is yes. So
okay.
Definitely do train sales teams, and whether or not the people who are brand new to sales recently worked with, I'll not give brand names on the air, worked with a huge global company and their global account directors. These are people who look after the big household names, the products that you'll have in your house right now. They look after them, but they look after them on a couple of continents. So everyone who's brand new to sales, all the way through to the people who've been doing it for 30, 40 years and are looking after massive accounts on 2 or 3 continents and everyone in between. So that's a big piece of what we do. And regardless of what industry, regardless of what they're selling, doesn't matter if it's B2B or B2C and how complex or otherwise the products are, we train them. But what we also do, and a bit of a passion of mine, is we help people to develop a coaching culture. So a big piece of what we do is coaching clients, but equally when clients say, you know what, it would make a big difference if we could get a coaching culture in the business and start to embed some learning. So we do that, and also do the speaking, because as a shy lad, I like to occasionally get up on stage and just take over, I suppose.
Good stuff. Well,
always lock the doors, people can't get out.
You can tell them the story about how you're a sales trader of the world.
Let me tell you about the facts I know about craft work and all that, yeah?
Yeah, we've just heard about it offline. I don't think listeners really want to hear about craft work.
Fascinating. That's probably a podcast of its own. We'll go into that again.
It probably is. It probably is, yes. Where was I going? Stop interrupting us. You honestly, seriously murder. I've just had 8 minutes, by the way, listeners, laughing intently, trying to calm down before we actually did this.
That's before you phoned me up. I don't know what you were doing.
Right, where was I going with this? All right, okay, sales training. Back on it again. Come on, back on it. Sales training. So you must have content and methodologies that you've created to train then? Is that how it works?
Yeah. So I started in sales, working on Bury. I'm from North Manchester and worked on Bury Market selling fishing tackle. And I worked for my brother-in-law, who I insist is still the best seller. He's never had any sales training, but he's without question the best salesman I've ever had the pleasure to observe. The guy is called John Hay. He is phenomenal.
Is he award-winning?
He really is. He's not that phenomenal.
Right, okay.
It really is just something else when it comes to being able to sell. The guy doesn't even... He does it so naturally. He was a bit of an inspiration, still is actually. And I got into sales training back in 96, but officially doing it with a proper job role of head of sales training from 97 onwards. And I love it. Oh, I love it. I just love that bit of uncovering this is what will make the difference and help a seller and a customer to have a much better experience that results in a fabulous customer experience and results in a sale for the business, but everyone's happy. No, when you don't think you've been sold to, but you've enjoyed buying. That's what I like. That's the bit that does it for me. And that's where, well, for 20 years and definitely as part of the team at New Results, that's where we've been focusing our efforts on saying, well, how do we create those easy to implement, easy to understand, inevitable things, whatever models you've got in place as a business, whatever training you've had before, something that will naturally overlay it. Not trying to replace anything, but will naturally overlay it. So whatever you've had before, this will turn it up to 10, or if you're a fan of Spinal Tap, we'll get it up to 11 for you.
Nicely done. So if you've got so I imagine you, this is going to sound really weird. I'm going to imagine you in a utility belt, okay? Tight like suit, you're a handsome guy, okay? Tight like suit, utility belt, lots of different methodologies and tools in this belt. Is this how it works? So you meet one of these sales team and you've just said there that they might have something going on, but you want to turn it up to 10. What do? Whip out one of your tools and overlay it over the top? How do you get them? I'm
not entirely sure where this is going. This is this is no longer a family show, Ian. I think you need to rein it in a bit, man.
It's never been a family show.
The way it works, it's about understanding. But it's the basics of selling. It's where are they now?
Mm-hmm.
So MD or sales director or HR director will say, look, we know we could be better. We're doing all right. Or we're not quite where we want to be, whatever the situation is, or we've got a really well-performing team. How do we keep it going? How do we lift them up a notch or two? So we need to understand, well, where are you now? Where are you trying to get to? And to have that defined by as many people as possible so we can understand what biases are at play and try and level it off and observe it for ourselves and speak with people who are thinking of training. So get as much input as possible as to where they are, what they're good at, what they don't believe they're so good at, where they're trying to get to, what the reasons for achieving that are. And then what we do is we build the program that causes that to happen. So yes, we've got something like 250, 300 hours worth of material as our foundation. Sometimes we'll create something new, but more often than not, out of that big bank of material that we've developed, in my case over 20 years, what we can do is we can say, right, these are some of the elements that we need. It's just like the periodic table, isn't it? You've got all the elements that sat there, but if you combine them in different ways, you end up with very different things. And it's kind of that approach that we've got a lot of starting blocks, and what we can do is we can pull things out according to what does this client need now to achieve what they're trying to achieve for their team.
You know, one thing that stuck off for me there was that you speak to many people, like, so you don't get that bias. I love that. So what we're saying there is that, you know, let's say a sales director or, you know, someone on the senior management team had a certain feeling or let's think, you know, like, it kind of, we really want to kick on. We think the company's doing this, but actually when you speak to the sales team, do you find that sometimes it's actually doing that? It's not what the senior management team have thought. Is that why you're speaking to many different people?
Yeah, and it goes back to something that happened. So I used to work for a UK bank. I was head of sales training for a UK bank. Excuse me. And I remember it would have been 1998. And I remember in a very big meeting room, it's quite intimidating, very big meeting room. There was myself, the two regional managers who looked after the branch network. So there must have been about, 1,000 people, 130 branches or so, and the sales director. Bearing in mind, the sales director was a former paratrooper and a formidable guy. Brilliant. I mean, a brilliant fella, but a really formidable. So there's the three of us sat there, and as by far the most junior person in the room, I'd learned to keep my mouth shut and just take everything in. And one of the things that they were talking about, because the idea was to plan what was the sales training that was needed to lift the performance across the network. And the two regional directors were saying, well, what we need some objection handling training. This is what we need. And they were both in firm agreement on this. So Brian, who was the sales director, turned to me and said, Mike, what do you think? I said, well, I respect the guys here. I said, but I genuinely don't think it is sales training. I don't think it is objection handling training that they need. What they actually need is training on how to ask the right questions at the right time and how to listen. And a big smile came across his face for a number of reasons. One, because I think this young buck actually did know his stuff. Two, because I'd done the observations and listened and seen in firsthand what was going on. And three, I was prepared to say, this is what you really do need. And, you know, the chaps given the due, they said, right, we respect that's what they need, and crack on and design the program, get delivered. We did that and it worked. It is what was needed. And I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that nobody needed objection handling training, but that wasn't the answer. The answer was, actually, if you ask the right questions at the right time, then shut up and listen and learn about your client, you're less likely to need to get into an objection situation.
Yeah, excellent. I was hoping that was the route you're going to go down, because I've done exactly the same as you. You know, there's no point in bringing someone in like you or I who's going to be a yes man and just do what you want. You've got to actually, you know, sometimes ask those difficult questions and have those difficult conversations, because the outcome is where you actually want to get to, you know, turning up to 10, not just bimbling around at 8 because they think it's the right way to do, because they'll end up just going with another sales trainer, or they'll end up just thinking, well, he was okay, but we didn't really turn it up to 10. So I love that. I'm really glad you give us that example. That's exactly the route I was going
It's a credibility thing, Ian, isn't it? Our careers are based on do you actually do what you say you're going to do?
Yeah.
And we'll have some fun along the way, because we know from a brain point of view, if you have a bit of fun along the way, it's more likely to stick. But there is some serious stuff in this. The thing that makes it stick is when people want to do it, when they're bought into it and they can see that there is value to this, and it's not just some theory out of a book, and it is from a real world application and explaining how and why it works. And I think that is why people use us to develop the sales team. Simple as that, because we understand why it works, we use it, we develop it ourselves, we understand from a behavioural point of view, both for the seller and the consumer, there are certain things that people by default will and won't do.
You know, you've, over that last few sentences there, you've kind of used a few words, okay? You've alluded to what I'm going to go next. You've talked about culture and human and behavior, and how we will remember things if we find it humorous, that kind of thing. Because Mike, you're quite heavy on the kind of psychology side, aren't you?
Yes. Yeah. So whilst my degree's in economics, I found that I was very often hovering around the psychology department at university.
I don't really want to hear
genuinely, because I just found it fascinating. It was only in the last 4 or 5 years when we've been working with a rather brilliant Doctor of Psychology, Dr. John Duggan. He's been teaching us some fascinating things. I signed up for a course on neuroeconomics, the psychology of decision making. I find it fascinating because the more we understand about why we do and don't do some of the things we do as humans, the more that we can apply it to life, and we can apply it to sales situations, we can apply it to leadership, you can apply it to home life. It doesn't matter, because it's about people, and because it's about the human brain. It's not about, well, that won't work in this culture. It's the human brain, so it works for 7.5 billion people.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen you train, and I was really impressed by it. I will say that to you, even though you're on the show, and it kills me to say it. But I was no, you're amazing. And what I loved about what the way your style was, that you wouldn't just kind of get a point across. You'd actually say why, and you drill right into the mechanics behind it. And just like obviously there, you're committing to do, more self-development and learning around that psychology space. It makes so much sense when you ask somebody to do something, but then you tell them why. There's nothing worse than someone just saying, just go and paint that fence over there. Like, yeah, but why? And you do that, really, really basic analogy, but you do really drill into the why and the how of sales training. And that's where I think you differ.
Thank you. I've just got the Karate Kid now going through my mind.
Yeah, you see.
You're going to ask me to clean some big American cars as well in a minute. I'll wax on and wax off.
Yeah, and it'll all just fall into place when you get into the dojo and you kick ass.
Oh man, I always remember the warm-ups in Taekwondo. I remember starting, it's like, my God, how am I going to get through a class? Because half an hour of warm-up killed me off.
But now you know why, don't you?
Huh? Yeah, wax on and wax off.
Yeah, now you know why the warm-up takes so long. Yeah. And why we've warmed up in decades of training, because the people listening to this will be sick of me saying this, that this 22-year-old life coach scenario, it just takes so long to get that kind of real world experience, I think, and to have that credibility to be able now at a kind of our age, 33, to be able to kind of train.
Are you 33? Oh, you're 5 years older than me, man.
I know. But it's the self-development and the experience that you've gone through really helps people now to share that. And I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't share this experience you've got now. So is this your passion now? You've got this, you've built it up. Now I need to share it. Was that what really makes you tick?
Yeah, it is. And if you think about having, and I'm conscious that I'm going to call myself an expert here, and I don't want to sound immodest, but you get to a point where you realize that's what you're an expert in.
Yeah.
And if I can share that with other people, so that they don't have to spend 20 years learning it, but instead have it over whether it's a 3, 6, 9, 12 month, whatever some clients like working with us 4 or 5 years in. But whatever that period is, if you can share that 20 years of experience so that it can help a business owner, an MD, a HR director, sales team, whatever it might be, whatever the job title is, if you can help them to achieve their goals so that they can focus on being the expert that they are, and bring someone in who's got that expertise in the field that they need, that will add value to what they're looking to achieve. But why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah. Perfect. You're going to put the phone down to me, and you're just going to be walking on air. You're an award-winning, expert, awesome utility belt wearing, sexy human.
I wonder if I can get that on my business card.
I will get this T-shirt made for you. It's going to be a big T-shirt.
Nice.
Well, actually,
extra large.
For your belly, right? I giveth and then taketh.
That's not belly. That's my tool belt that I have under my shirt, discreetly hidden.
Right. Listen, we need to give some value to our listeners. Okay, I want you.
I think they've gone now, Ian.
Yeah.
If you've got any listeners still, it's only because they haven't figured out to hit that cross in the top right corner.
No, I want you to share some of your training, Mike. right? Okay, so you've got stacks of content there. Let's talk about something that a real good takeaway, drop some massive value bombs that our listeners can take away and implement. What can we talk about?
I'm going to talk about the newest, biggest piece that has the feedback. I mean, you know, when you create stuff and you think, oh, I hope this lands well. The feedback has been better than if I'd written the feedback for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Genuinely, the feedback has completely blown me away. And it all came from a question probably about 4 years ago that I was asking myself and asking Dr. Duggan, like, where do behaviours come from? And I'm conscious that I'm not the first person to go into this, and there's a lot written on it. But it was a genuine question of, so why do people do some of the things they do? You know, from I love the 1930s photograph, or probably 1920s photograph of the American construction workers who were up on that piece of scaffolding having some lunch.
Yeah.
Not all of whom are wearing PPE, by the way. So that's probably a breach anyway.
And I think and you look at that, it might be gin and vodka.
So you look at that and think, well, why are they doing that? And then you see people now smoking a cigarette, and you think, well, they know it's not good for them. And I'm not judging, but you watch people doing stuff and think, why are they doing that? And sometimes we catch ourselves and think, why do we behave this way? But customers who know the best thing to do is to take this particular course of action and do something else instead. And again, I'm just fascinated by the human behavior piece of why do we do some of the stuff we do, and why do we not do some of the things that we really know we should do? And that started a big conversation and a lot of research that resulted in a big scrawly model that I remember talking to my colleague Nick and saying, yeah, that's not accessible at all, is it? I mean, it was accurate, but there was no way to be able to share it. So I had to refine it down, and again, working with Dr. Duggan and saying, look, does this make sense? And then getting it verified by another doctor of psychology, a chap over at Teesside University called Dr. Paul Allen Armstrong. Again, very kindly gave up some of his time and validated this. And what we use it for is both for people who want to understand the psychology of seller behavior, the psychology of consumer behavior, and it works in coaching as well, because it is very much about human behavior. And then very cheekily, we added a bit on, which is the ABCD. So we've got this piece that looks at where do behaviors come from, and then we're focusing separately on this ABCD piece. At which point you say, what's the ABCD piece, Mike?
So this ABCD piece,
Don't you worry, and you just sit there looking good. I'll do your job for you, mate. It's all right. Good grief.
Is that a cat out the window? Oh, sorry, Mike. Yeah. This ABCD, but come on, what's all that about?
Right. So the behavioural piece, and then it was about. So there was a bit missing. I wanted to put something in about. So the behaviours is one piece, but what about the decisions? How do we end up at these decisions, and what's influencing this? And at about that time, one of the senior folks over at Heineken said, would you be interested in coming speaking at our conference? And I said, yes, I would. And I got chatting with him. And the bit that landed with me was Heineken lager. Essentially, it's 4 ingredients. So what if there was 4 key ingredients that could explain this whole decision-making piece? And what if there was somewhere, and it sounds like it was engineered, but it was genuinely one of those cases where everything just started to fall into place, that it was the D of the ABCD was the decisions. And it was about, well, what's the ABC? The A is our awareness, B is bias, C are comfort zones, and how all of these interplay and affect the decisions that we make. And the beautiful thing is that almost all of this happens at a subconscious level when we allow it to. That's how we wired up. That's what will happen. That's why we end up making some of the decisions that we make, or most of the decisions that we make, is that the conscious brain finds out eventually, but the subconscious has been doing all the hard work for ages in the background. The problem is when we're left to our own devices, we'll just typically make the decisions that we always make. Now, sometimes that's all right. Sometimes that's pretty innocuous, but sometimes the decisions are too big to be left to our biases without holding them to account. And because we're at the mercy of our comfort zones, and because we've not given them the due level of awareness and attention that they need. So that's where it all comes in, the ABCD: awareness, bias, comfort, and decisions.
So what do you do then, Mike? So do you drill into each one of those? So do you start talking about awareness then?
Yeah. And there's a few exercises we do to demonstrate it, which I'll not give away because, it might be that your listener decides to get in touch and fancies a bit of this for their teams. But in essence, what we talk about is, from an awareness point of view, we demonstrate how unaware or inattentive we are. And we balance it off because we are, from a statistical point of view, we are not aware of anything. And from a brain capacity point of view, it's phenomenally powerful. And we share 2 very short examples of this, and we demonstrate it as well. We've got a tool to demonstrate this. And no, it doesn't involve gorillas walking past people who are throwing balls to each other. We've moved on from that. And we talk about why it's important that we appreciate our level of awareness. We've got a narrow bandwidth. And again, this has been postulated for decades, but it's generally accepted that we have got this very, very narrow bandwidth that we can focus on. And so what we need to do is we need to choose what we are going to focus on.
Okay.
A brilliant book that came out last year by Dr. Tasha Eurich, and anyone who's interested in being self-aware and drilling into this vast minefield of emotional intelligence, I would thoroughly recommend Dr. Tasha Eurich's book, Insight. She has a very good TED Talk as well that's free to watch. And the advice that she gives is, you need to reflect less and notice more. The risk attached to sitting back at the end of a day or a couple of days later and reflecting on a situation. The problem is that your brain will just edit those memories, typically to remove anything that makes you look bad or goes against your internal values. So we need to be noticing more in the moment and reflecting less. We need to keep track of our goals, get somebody who we trust to hold us to account. That ties in with a brilliant piece of research done by Dr. Gail Matthews. And again, there is a summary of her research that's available for free on the internet. And get somebody that we trust and somebody who will be honest to give us some feedback, because we are narrowly aware of the things that we do. And some folks will say, you're just talking about 360-degree feedback. Maybe that's what you want to call it, but getting somebody who's honest, somebody who you trust, whether it's a colleague or somebody within your close circle of friends, within your business network, ask them to give you some feedback. You need to be mindful that if you're going to ask for this, that accept what you're given. That's
a really good point. So if you don't mind us drilling in, so you mentioned colleagues there. Is it one of your colleagues that does this with you, Mike, or do you have a mentor yourself?
I've had a number of different mentors over the years, and we're quite lucky within our team that we are honest with each other, and we have to accept that. And given that we coach other people, we have to accept that there are things that we'll do intentionally or unintentionally, is most of the case, that can cause a bit of friction. And sometimes you do need a bit of friction. I mean, there's a great piece by 2 UK research scientists, Reynolds and Lewis, who talk about cognitive diversity. And one of the advantages, again, of our team is that we don't all see the world in the same way.
Yeah.
And that means that we're able to solve things a bit quicker. One of the offshoots of that sometimes is because we don't see things the same way. We need to take that into account when we are putting proposals forward, when we are discussing as a group what we need to be doing. But when you're coupling the fact that as coaches, as people who are prepared to accept and give and receive feedback, it balances it off.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, actually. So things like putting a proposal together, a number of heads putting that together and overseeing it can work much better than that one person, because you are seeing things from different places.
Yes, exactly.
Cool.
Exactly. And there was a good bit of feedback from one of our business mentors, and it radically shifted the way that we put a particular proposal together for a client.
Oh, really?
And actually, the news this morning is that we've got that piece of work, and that's brilliant, because actually they are the leading global player in their sector.
Congratulations!
Thank you very much.
There you go. You heard it here first.
That's nice. Yeah.
So, I'm pushing you on this, mate, because that was I want you did say that if anybody wanted to get in touch, but I'm just getting it all out of you. I want to hear what
you want the next bit. You want the bias, don't you?
Bias, come on.
You want the bias. So the leading experts in this one are Tversky and Kahneman, who I believe Kahneman won the Nobel Prize, didn't he? So he's done all right. it's not quite as good as winning Britain's Sales Trainer of the Year.
Not.
Did we mention that?
Yeah.
But he got a Nobel Prize, so it's a decent second or third. If he'd applied himself, what he could have achieved.
Exactly, yeah.
So Dan, as I call him, so Dan Kahneman, me and Dan, we're very close. So Dan Kahneman and Tversky, they catalogued probably about 200 different biases operating at an unconscious level. And I was training a team of trainers last week for a national wealth management service. And it was interesting because they were saying, this word bias, it seems to have negative connotations attached to it. So do we need to call it something else? Anyway, we're stuck with bias because that's what they are. But we separate off the fact that there's two sides to this. There's the biases or the heuristics, these shortcuts that we take that are really useful. I'm sat in a nice, very comfy chair in my office at home. But if you've never sat in this chair before, because of virtue of the fact you've sat in other chairs, you come in, you can sit down in it, and you don't need to be retrained. Those shortcuts allow us to do these things. The problem is when we allow all these shortcuts to become assumptions and to become the way that we always do things, that very dangerous phrase, that's how we've always done things. That Grace Hopper, I think, those dangerous phrases that we hear with clients and usually non-clients will say, well, that's the way we've always done things around here. Yeah, it's because you're allowing your biases to take shape. And we need to hold them to account. We need to be, links into awareness, doesn't it? We need to be aware of what are the things that we do and take for granted and never deviate from, because they are genuinely the best thing to do, and we don't need to expend energy on that. But then what are the things that we're doing because we're just not thinking about it? And the big one for me, for sales and for coaches, is the bias of the language that we use. There is a brilliant TED Talk by a lady called, I think she's called Lera Boroditsky, and she talks about the bias of language. And I'd urge your listeners to watch it. It's brilliant. Surname Boroditsky. And it's just fascinating insight into the bias of language, particularly when you compare the language of English native speakers and Spanish native speakers. And if we observe somebody breaking a vase, how in English the emphasis, our biases on somebody broke the vase, whilst the Spanish native influence is the vase is broken. Very different, and it means very different things when you come to give feedback, evidential feedback as to an event that's happened. So again, we need to be mindful of this. Any global businesses must be mindful of that. And if you think about English and Spanish as being two of the biggest, most spoken languages in the world, kind of key that we understand this. But if you get it back down to even SME and national, regional businesses, what they need to be mindful of from a sales point of view is, what is the bias of the language of those salespeople? That will come into play in what's the questions that they're asking.
Okay.
Going back to working at the bank, one of the startling things, probably in 98, 99, was when I was training a team who sold general insurance. They sold buildings and contents insurance. And the policy that we had at the bank was referred to as a Rolls-Royce product at a Rolls-Royce price. See what they did there? And it wasn't cheap, but it wasn't intended to be cheap. It was intended to be all covering.
Yeah.
And the policy, the summary policy document was thicker than most people's full summary document to give you a flavour of just what it covered. And what happened was the salespeople, after probably 6 to 9 months, would fall into the trap of, they would subconsciously say, if I was buying this policy, these are the things I would value, which might be 5 or 6 elements of this product. And therefore, their questions unconsciously were biased to, this is what I value from this product. So it was no longer a clean questioning scenario with a potential customer. It was all about them. Now, you'd listen to it, and if you didn't take this into account, you'd listen to it and go, well, there are some decent questions there. But when you really understood what was going on, what you actually saw was happening was, this was no longer a conversation about the customer. This was now a conversation to establish, I wonder which of my shared values this customer has.
Yeah.
So the seller then starts projecting their values onto the customer.
Okay.
And you really are playing a numbers game there, rather than genuinely saying, how do I shape my questions so they are not biased by my values and they are not biased by the product, but instead they are intentionally about, what does this customer need? So it's a massive one, and it's something that we cover, and we help sales teams to realize there are alternative ways to shape the questions. And as soon as they do that, the impact on both the conversion rates, but also on how quickly the sale gets closed and how more satisfied the customer is with the experience. A number of times we had customers afterwards say, surprisingly, after a mortgage interview or an insurance interview, saying, "Oh, I enjoyed that." Yeah, of course you did, because it was about you. It wasn't about them. It wasn't about the products. It was genuinely a conversation about you.
So thinking about training sales teams, do you sit in on these calls or these interviews, or do you have like mock interviews with them?
Yeah, we do mock interviews. We've brought clients in. We have a telecoms client who said one of their particular teams, one of their business development managers, they really struggled to have particular conversations with finance directors. So we said, that's fine. We know finance directors, so let's create a brief. So we create the scenario. We brought a finance director in. Genuine FD came in for the interview, and in a room with the video camera set up, the BDM interviewed, or rather, conducted a sales meeting with a genuine FD. So we can do that. We can do role plays if clients want role plays. Kind of gone out of favour a bit. We have an alternative called forum theatre. We do side-by-side call listening. We do that a lot. And we do accompanied visits, again, with BDMs, actually with chairman. If it's a big client, there's a client of ours who went to see one of the top 100 companies. And I think I said the name then. And I went with them. So I was with the chairman as he was preparing the pitch, gave him some advice in terms of the presentation, how to do it, bearing in mind who they were talking to. I was there to observe, but the agreement was if it was appropriate, I would step into the conversations as well. Now, this is an industry that I've never worked in, but because of my understanding of people and selling, I was able to add value to it. And the great news is that, they've gone ahead and started to work with our client. So there's a number of ways that we can add value. And whether it is that we'll do some role plays, we'll do some forum theatre, we'll bring in some actual people who are FDs and the rest of those roles that you struggle to sell to and get feedback from them, through to we'll come and do accompanied visits. We'll either just observe or we'll be a part of the discussions. We'll help you with your presentations. We'll review your proposals. Yeah, we'll do whatever is right for that client, because we've been in commerce for so long at senior level.
It's really reassuring for me to hear that, because if like that BDM you mentioned there, who particularly wasn't performing in that FD space, rather than just let that person go, they're actually like trying to skill them up or her up, because they may be good at other 80% of other stuff, but there's a little gap there. Let's just upskill that gap rather than let them go, yeah?
Yes. And again, it was interesting because that was a bias that they had. It was a thing in their brain from somewhere, somewhere between a bias and a comfort issue, that if they were meeting somebody who happened to have the FD title, they had issues with it, as opposed to it's a person who, for however many hours a week, does that role that you could apply that label to. So it was interesting because they were brilliant with anyone else. So we were just helping them to overcome that barrier and say, look, you can still have these discussions. There's just some of the questions and some of the things you need to be mindful of when you are talking to someone who happens to be a finance director.
That's great from a culture point of view, that give that person the time and the investment to bring you guys in to upskill them rather than let them go. That's great. So You've just alluded to the next one, which was C, which was comfort. So go for it.
Well, I guess it's impossible to talk about comfort zones without talking about CIA interrogation techniques, and that's a bit obvious, but no, but genuinely, because there's so I've mentioned a couple of books, mentioned a couple of TED Talks. Let's go for radio then. There is on BBC Radio iPlayer, you can, I believe, still get a BBC Radio 4 program called Good Psychologist, Bad Psychologist. And what it's probably about as far removed from sales and coaching as you're going to get. But what they talked about was the CIA's interrogation techniques that came out of 9/11 and how they were informed by doctors of psychology who had served in the forces and the programs that they put in place since. And we're talking things like waterboarding. And what they realized quite quickly, and therefore have done away with since, is those techniques don't work. And the reason they don't work is tied up in comfort zones. And in particular, the stress hormone, cortisol. And I am mindful here that I'm simplifying a a little bit. But if we think about our comfort zones and we think about drawing that little picture of a person inside of a circle and that circle representing our comfort zones, I guess the first thing to say is comfort zones are neither good nor bad. They just are. They are what they are. My eyes are green because they're green. That's not good. It's not bad. It's just that's what colour they are. So if we think about, first of all, we've got our comfort zone and we have one and that's that. It's then what do we do with it? It's then whether we allow for the fact that our brains are neuroplastic. They are designed to develop and to take on board new skills and experience and to push what's possible. Our brains are built for that to be possible. So what we need to do is push that comfort zone and develop it. And we've all done that. Everybody listening to this podcast has done that because over the years, the things that they were capable of doing as a toddler and the things that they were then capable of doing in the teen years and then onwards, as they've grown and developed as adults, we have continued to push and develop and learn new things and build new connections in the brain. And all that time, we've been pushing our comfort zone and expanding it out. So we know that the brain is capable of doing that. We know it is designed to do that. Just for some of us, it's easier to do than for others. Sometimes there's a situation where we need to step too far out of our comfort zone for too long. And that's where it becomes damaging. And this was a link into the CIA interrogation, was that if you are too far out of your comfort zone for too long, there's a number of things that happen. When your cortisol level reaches a particular threshold, and it's different for each individual, some of your core functioning shuts down. And if you put this in the context now of sales, one of the first things that shuts down is your capability to listen. That's pretty fundamental from a seller's point of view. You're no longer able to listen. The second thing it shuts down is access to your memories. So if you're now in a situation that you find particularly stressful as a seller, what's going to happen is, unless you manage it, you're no longer going to be listening and you're no longer going to have access to your memories. And that's pretty fundamental as a seller, that you can do those two things. Fortunately, there are some basic techniques which are borrowed from yoga, from meditation. It's these cleansing breaths. And the trick is to take over from a particular part of the brain called the amygdala and say to the amygdala, we're not in a stress situation. You can stand down. You can just go back to scanning. I'll take over again. I'll resume control of these functions. Just do some breathing in through the nose. Breathe in for the count of 4. Hold it for the count of 4. Exhale for the count of 4. Do that 4 times. That will help to take over your breathing, which will help to stand your amygdala down, which will help to get your cortisol levels back under control, bring your listening back online, and enable you to get access to your memories again.
How many people are breathing in and out here?
Well, I hope everybody is, because otherwise they're in trouble.
So that was comfort zone. Just a little bit on that, if I can just touch upon that. So
yeah,
can you train people to stay in their comfort zone longer or push that comfort zone? I was just trying to think of an athlete there. For instance, a friend of mine is just in an ultra kind of 50-mile marathon-y ultra thing. And that's got to be out your comfort zone. And I was just trying to think, how do you train for that? What happens when you get like 30 odd miles and you just want to stop? Like, so how is there a possibility to train through comfort zones?
There is, yeah. And the ultra running one is a particularly interesting area, because this is where the brain and the body will give up at different points. And there's some great research. I'll tell you what, the American US Navy SEALs have been particularly helpful in this. They've showed a lot of their techniques. What they found was when they were recruiting, the drop-off rate, so a bit like our Royal Marines, the commandos, when with the special forces in each of these countries, what was happening was they knew that most people weren't going to get through, but there were some people who should have got through, but they didn't get through, not because the body had given up, but because the brain had given up. And so what they did was they changed some of the techniques to say, so one of the things that the US Navy SEALs will do is 5:30 in the morning, the entire team get up, or regiment get up, and they'll go down. If they're by the water, they'll go down, they'll get dressed. 5:30, imagine this, no matter how cold it is, they'll link arms and they'll lie in the water, in the freezing water for however long it is. And then they get up and they say, well, why do you do that? And they say, well, first of all, there's good things around team build. But how bad's your day got to be that something worse is going to happen than that? Yeah. And it is about understanding that if we condition ourselves and accept that this is something that we can do, that we can accept, that the risk attached to it is just a perceived one in the brain. It's not a real one that exists in the real life. And that's what the SEALs do. That's what various elite forces and elite teams. So outside of the forces, elite teams do this. So going back to your ultra runners, what they're doing is they are helping the brain to realize that the body has got more to give, because the brain will give up long before the capability of the body will. So what they do is, and I was talking to a marathon runner 2 weeks ago and saying, so, do you hit the wall? And so, well, they thought it was a bit of a fallacy, but it was that strange situation of the brain going, I've got to give up. I can't do this anymore. And all the while the legs are still going at the same pace. So it was happening, and it wasn't anything to do with, it wasn't cramp setting in, it wasn't salt, it wasn't carbs running out. It was just at some point in the brain they're saying, I'm too tired, I can't carry on. And then that strange realization of, actually, while I'm thinking this, I am carrying on.
Yeah.
So it's that self-talk, and it's about recognizing, again, be your own cheerleader. Be the person who says, we've got this, look what we've achieved, look where we're going, this is what we're going to do next. And it is that one foot in front of another. And yeah, you can train yourself to do it. And every time someone puts an extra half mile, an extra mile on, you are pushing that comfort zone further out. Typically not for the legs, not for the muscles, but more for the brain to accept, I can do this. And because of the power of the brain, because it is this all governing organ, that's the bit that we need to control. That's the bit that we need to take by the scruff and say, I can achieve this. Not by saying I'm going to, not by doing the couch to 150, it's doing the couch to 5k or whatever those distances are. It is that, what's the bit that I'm going to achieve? What's that next little step? Not that's too far out my comfort zone, I'll never achieve it, let's rein it back in.
I could talk you all day on this one, because it's something I play with when I run. Sometimes I do get that wall, and then I can trick my brain, and next thing you know, I've done another mile and I'm thinking about something else, and I'm just trying to forget about it and push it out of my head, and it keeps coming back in. And it's funny, isn't it, when you're on your own and your brain just plays with you.
Look at some of the greats from sport, and look at Ronnie O'Sullivan from snooker. Look at some of the great golfers. We just had a brilliant Open, haven't we, that's been on. And when you hear them talking about what they're doing, they talk about, and some of the footballers from the World Cup, and they say, you've got to get this right in your mind, which is, you're going out and you're having a kickabout with the lads, you're having a game of golf with your mates, you're just having a game of, you're doing a few frames down the snooker club. That's, when we set it in that context, it changes the pressure. And when you take the pressure off, the skills that these folks, these men and women have got, the skill is allowed to flourish. We allow it to happen. You look at, I was watching some of the Tour de France, and you look at the speed they're cycling up some of the mountains, and you see them chatting with each other and saying, how is that even, how are you doing that? And yeah, of course they've trained so that they've got the physique and the muscles, and they have a brilliant dietary intake. The stuff that Sir Dave's been doing with the teams has been phenomenal. But at the same time, there's that huge mental piece of, yeah, I can achieve this. I can do this. And that's what they work on, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
They work on the little 1% things that will enable them to mentally accept that you can achieve what you're setting out for here.
100%. I love that one thing, because I play with this loads in some of my coaching as well, especially around like boxing and things. It's like, just try to get those little 0.5%, 1% here, 2% there, 1% there. Next thing you've built 5 or 10% on your game. I love that. I could play all day with this. We're going to have to move.
My dad was a boxer for the British Forces, right. Yeah, and he was in the top 4 of the combined forces. So it was a phenomenal sportsman, and he got beat in the semi-finals for a national tournament. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, so I wasn't born. This was when he was probably 19, 20. Not in the year 1920. He was about 19 or 20 at the time. And I said, so what happened? He says, I just got arrogant. So it was interesting. He went the other way. Yeah, he said, I stopped listening to my seconds. I was just caught up in it. Yeah. I wasn't concentrating on what I needed to do. So you need to balance this, because all of this ultimately feeds into the decisions that you make.
Our friend of the show, Simon Raybould, talks a lot about this.
It does.
About preparation,
Dr.
making lists.
Although secretly, don't we all prefer small Simon?
We do. I was going to say, he's been on our show twice, our Simon. There's only 2 people who've done it. He's the man. He's the man.
He's all right.
Come on, what's D? What's the D all about?
And as I look up, I see Presentation Genius set on my shelf. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, man. D is decisions. Because left to the devices, the decisions that we'll make will be influenced by our biases. The decisions that we'll make will be whatever our comfort zone is comfortable with. So we do this as a circle. So think about clock first. You got A up at 12 o'clock, you got B at 9 o'clock, you got C at 3 o'clock, you got D down at 6 o'clock. The awareness at the top. Number one, you've got to choose to focus on the things that are important. Don't leave it to chance. Don't be looking out the window going, oh, there's a shiny thing. Oh, look how many magpies there are. It's focus on the things that are important. One of those things is be aware of what your biases are and how they are influencing the decisions, the conversations, the questions that you're asking. Be aware equally of the comfort zone. Where are you within your comfort zone? How close are you to pushing it out to a point where it is advantageous to be at, because you are at a point where you are trying new things, giving it a go, doing the things that are the right things but might cause you a little bit of discomfort, but not to the point that it's going to start some of your major functions shutting down, like listening and access to your memories. Because when we have those levels of awareness, when we are controlling our bias in our comfort zones, we can then start to make the right decisions. But if we choose not to focus on them, the decisions we'll make will be the ones that we always did, and that's where we end up with a situation of, this is how we've always done things around here, and we get stagnation. That's not good.
It's not good at all, and that's a great way to put it all together. I love that A, B, C, D. So I'm looking at time. We're going to have to wrap this up, Mike, but you are going to give us one of the longest show notes ever, my friend, because we've talked TED Talks and you've named lots of crazy foreign people that I can't even pronounce, Nobel Peace Prize winners, all this good carry on. So I'm going to have to drop you an email and you're going to have to tell me, list all this for me, because there's some great resources there for listeners. I'm really appreciative that you've dove into ABCD for me. Thanks so much. Mike, I think we'll have to get you back on as well.
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on the show, Ian. Love it. Love the stuff you do.
Excellent stuff. So there's Mike, sales trainer from New Results. Thanks, Mike.
Cheers, Ian.
So my friends, I encourage you to check out the bumper show notes. I've been fortunate enough to have attended one of Mike's sessions, and he's the real deal. He backs everything he says up with studies and findings. You probably heard that and realised that. He doesn't just regurgitate other people's stuff. So I hope you took something away from today. Until next time, I'm Ian Farrer. This is the Industry Angel, and thanks for listening.